The rain hammered against the tin roof of my little wooden house like angry fists from the sky. It was late evening in our quiet corner of rural Vermont, where the hills rolled soft and green in summer, but turned cold and unforgiving in fall. I sat in my old rocking chair by the window, the one my late husband, George, had carved for me back when we were young and full of dreams. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, clutched a faded quilt around my shoulders. Across from me, on the worn rug, sat my granddaughter, little Emily, 8 years old, with wide blue eyes and curly brown hair that reminded me so much of her mother. She looked up at me, her small face glowing in the warm light of the kerosene lamp. "Grandma Ruth," she said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze, "tell me a story. One from when you were my age." I smiled, but inside, my heart twisted like an old root pulled from the earth. How could I tell her the happy tales when the weight of my past pressed down so heavy? But stories are what bind us, aren't they? They teach us to love, to lose, to survive, and to hope. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of pine from the woods outside. "All right, my sweet Emily," I whispered. "But this one's not from when I was little. It's from not so long ago. And it starts with a secret I overheard one stormy night, much like this one. A secret that broke my world apart." Emily leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She didn't know it yet, but this tale was her family's hidden scar, a story of betrayal that nearly tore us all to pieces. It was 2 years back, in the spring of 2023. I lived alone in this very house, the one George and I built with our own hands after the war. He was gone by then, taken by a heart attack 10 years earlier, leaving me with memories and this patch of land. Our son, Michael, had grown up here, running through the apple orchards and fishing in the nearby creek. He moved to the city, Burlington, for work, married a woman named Lisa, and they had Emily. I thought life was settling into a peaceful rhythm. Michael visited often, bringing groceries and fixing things around the house. Lisa came too, though her smiles always seemed a bit too tight, like a dress sewn too small. One weekend, they all came to stay. Emily was just 6 then, full of giggles and questions. We baked apple pies in the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon filling the air. But that night, after Emily went to bed, I heard voices from the guest room. The walls in this old house are thin as paper, whispers carry like wind through cracks. I wasn't eavesdropping, not at first. I was in the hallway, heading to the kitchen for a glass of water, my slippers shuffling softly on the creaky floorboards. But then I heard Lisa's voice, sharp and low. "Michael, we can't keep pretending. Your mother's getting old. She can't handle this big house anymore. It's falling apart, the roof leaks, the garden's overgrown. And honestly, I don't want this useless old woman dragging us down." My heart stopped. I froze there in the dark, one hand on the wall for support. Useless old woman. Me? The woman who had scrubbed floors on her knees to send Michael to college. Who walked miles in snowstorms to fetch medicine when he was sick as a boy. Who sacrificed her own dreams, giving up nursing school, to raise him after George came back broken from the war. Michael's voice came next, hesitant but not defending me. "Lisa, come on. Mom's tough. She's managed alone since Dad died. Tough. She's a burden, Michael. My parents could use this land. It's prime country, perfect for their retirement cabin. We could sell it to them cheap, fix our debts. Tell her it's time for a nursing home. She's 78, it's for her own good." I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle a gasp. The hallway spun around me, the shadows from the moon outside dancing like mocking ghosts on the walls. My own son, my flesh and blood, considering this. giving away the house George and I poured our souls into. The house where we laughed, cried, and built a life from nothing. Tears burned my eyes as I slipped back to my room, the quilt suddenly feeling like chains. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling beams George had hammered in place, remembering the tragedies that had already scarred me. Losing my parents young in a car crash, marrying George amid the chaos of post-war America, watching him fade away day by day. I'd survived it all through sheer will, clinging to love like a lifeline. But this felt like the final blow. The next morning, breakfast was tense. Emily chatted about birds she'd seen, oblivious to the storm brewing. Lisa pushed her plate away with a sigh, her eyes flicking to me like I was an unwelcome guest in my own home. Michael avoided my gaze, stirring his coffee endlessly. "Mom," he finally said, his voice too casual, "we've been thinking maybe it's time to downsize. For your sake." I forced a smile, my hands trembling as I poured more coffee. Inside, rage and hurt boiled like a pot left too long on the stove. But I said nothing. Not yet. I'd learned long ago that survival means playing the long game. That afternoon, as they packed to leave, Lisa hugged me goodbye with her usual smugness, whispering, "Take care, Ruth. We'll talk soon." As their car disappeared down the dirt road, kicking up dust, I stood on the porch, the wind whipping my grey hair. Little did they know, I had a plan forming in my mind, a quiet act of protection born from years of loss and quiet strength. But the real twist came the very next week, when a letter arrived that changed everything. Emily's eyes were wide now, the lamp flickering shadows across her face. "What happened next, Grandma? What was in the letter?" I patted her hand, feeling the warmth of her small fingers in mine. "Patience, child. That's for another chapter. But remember this, even in the darkest betrayal, there's a spark of hope if you hold on tight." The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the air damp and heavy with the scent of wet earth. My little house in Vermont felt quieter than ever, as if it held its breath, waiting for what came next. I sat at the kitchen table, a chipped mug of tea steaming in my hands, while Emily nestled beside me on the bench, her small hands clutching a crayon as she drew flowers on a scrap of paper. The kerosene lamp still flickered from last night, casting a golden glow over her curls. Outside, the apple orchard stood silent, its branches heavy with fruit no one had picked. "Grandma Ruth," Emily said, not looking up from her drawing, "what was in that letter? The one you said changed everything." I took a slow sip of tea, the warmth doing little to ease the ache in my chest. "It was a letter from an old friend, Emily," I said, my voice soft but steady. "But to understand it, you need to know what happened in the days after your daddy and Lisa left. That week, I carried a secret heavier than all the losses I'd known, and I've known plenty." Emily's crayon paused, her blue eyes locking onto mine. I could see she sensed the story deepening, like a river turning dark before a fall. I leaned back, the wooden chair creaking, and let my mind drift to that spring week in 2023, when betrayal had settled into my bones like winter's chill. Underscore 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 underscore. After Michael and Lisa drove away, I stood on the porch longer than I meant to, watching the dust settle on the road. My hands gripped the railing, the same railing George had sanded smooth when we were newlyweds, dreaming of a family. Now, that family felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Lisa's words, "useless old woman," echoed in my head, each one a needle in my heart. Michael's silence hurt worse. My boy, who I'd raised to be kind, had said nothing to defend me. I didn't cry, though. Tears are for when you've given up, and Ruth Marie Thompson never gives up. I'd survived too much, losing my parents at 16 in that awful crash on Route 7, nursing George through his war scars, burying him when his heart gave out. I'd scrubbed floors, sewn clothes by hand, and gone hungry to make sure Michael had enough. This house, this land, it was all I had left of those sacrifices. And I'd be damned if I let Lisa's greedy family snatch it away. That week, I moved like a ghost through my routine. I tended the garden, pulling weeds with hands that shook from anger, not age. I swept the porch, the broom's bristles worn as thin as my patience. But every night, I sat at this very table, staring at a yellowed photograph of George and me, taken the day we finished building this house. His arm was around me, his grin wide, my eyes bright with hope. That hope felt so far away now. Then, on a Tuesday morning, the letter arrived. The mail truck rattled up the dirt road, and old Mr. Jenkins, our postman for 30 years, handed me a plain envelope with no return address. My name, Ruth Thompson, was written in a shaky hand, the ink smudged like it had been written in a hurry. I thanked him, my voice calm, but my fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in black ink. Ruth, it began, I heard what's happening. Meet me at the old mill by the creek, Thursday at dusk. I have something you need to know. Clara. Clara. My oldest friend, who'd lived down the road since we were girls. She'd moved to Montpelier years ago, but we still wrote letters, sharing bits of our lives like crumbs from a shared loaf. If Clara had tracked me down like this, it was serious. My stomach knotted as I tucked the letter into my apron pocket, glancing out the window at the orchard. The apples gleamed red in the sun, but all I could see was Lisa's smug smile, her voice whispering about selling this land. Thursday came, grey and cold. I told no one where I was going, not even Mrs. Carter, my neighbor, who checked on me sometimes. I pulled on my old wool coat, the one George used to tease. Smelled like mothballs, and walked the mile to the old mill by Willow Creek. The path was overgrown, roots snaking across the dirt like they wanted to trip me. My knees ached, but I kept moving, driven by a fire I hadn't felt in years. The mill was crumbling, its wooden walls silvered with age, the wheel long stopped. Clara stood there, her white hair tucked under a scarf, her face lined but fierce. She hugged me tight, her hands strong despite her 79 years. Ruth, she said, her voice low, I overheard something in town. Lisa's parents were at the diner, bragging about how they are getting your land for a steal. Said Michael's already agreed to sign it over. My breath caught, sharp as a blade. He wouldn't, I whispered, but even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. Michael's hesitation that weekend, his avoidance of my eyes, it all made sense now. Clara gripped my arm. His under her thumb, Ruth. But there's more. They don't know you still hold the deed. The deed. My heart thudded. George and I had never transferred the property to Michael, though we'd talked about it. The papers were still in my name, locked in the safe upstairs. I'd kept it that way after George died, not out of mistrust, but because this house was my anchor. Now, it was my shield. Clara handed me a folded document, her eyes sharp. I pulled some strings at the county office. This is a copy of your deed, Ruth. They can't take what's legally yours unless you sign it away. But Lisa's pushing hard. You need to act fast. That night, back in my house, I sat alone with the deed in my hands, its edges worn from years in the safe. The weight of it felt heavier than the paper itself, decades of love, loss, and survival pressed into those lines of ink. I thought of George, his calloused hands building this home. I thought of Michael as a boy, laughing in the orchard. And I thought of Emily, my light, who deserved to know the truth about her family. I made a decision then, under the flickering lamp. I wouldn't confront Michael yet. I'd wait, watch, and plan. Survival had taught me patience, and love had taught me to protect what mattered. But the pain of it, the betrayal of my own son, cut deeper than any loss I'd known. I folded the deed away, my hands steady now, and whispered a promise to the empty room, this house stays mine. Emily's crane had stopped moving entirely. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Grandma, did Daddy really do that? Try to give your house away. I reached for her hand, her warmth grounding me. It's complicated, sweet girl. People make mistakes when they are pulled in too many directions. But the story's not done. There's still hope in it, I promise. The morning sun crept through the lace curtains, painting golden patches on the wooden floor of my Vermont home. Emily sat cross-legged on the rug, her crayons scattered like fallen leaves, her eyes fixed on me with a mix of wonder and worry. The air smelled of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of apples from the orchard outside. My rocking chair creaked as I leaned forward, the quilt slipping off my shoulders. My hands, worn from years of work, felt steady now, ready to finish the story I'd begun. Grandma Ruth, Emily said, her voice small but eager, what happened after you got the deed? Did you keep the house? I smiled, though my heart carried the weight of what came next. I did, sweet girl. But it wasn't just about keeping the house. It was about keeping our family whole. Let me tell you how it ended, or maybe, how it began again. Underscore 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 underscore. It was late spring 2023. A week after Clara's warning at the old mill. The air was warm, the orchard blooming with pink and white blossoms that fell like snow. I'd spent days thinking, planning, my mind sharp despite the pain in my chest. Michael and Lisa thought they could take this house, my home, my history, without a fight. But they didn't know Ruth Marie Thompson. I'd survived too much to let go now. I called Clara first. She knew a lawyer in Burlington, a kind man named Mr. Harper, who helped folks like me for little pay. I met him at his office, a small room cluttered with books and papers. My hands shook as I handed him the deed, but my voice was steady. I want to protect this land, I told him. Not just for me, but for my granddaughter, Emily. It's her future, too. Mr. Harper adjusted his glasses, his eyes kind but serious. You've got a strong case, Ruth. The deed's in your name, clear as day. They can't force you out. But if Michael's involved, it could get messy. Family disputes always do. I nodded, my jaw tight. I don't want to hurt my son. I just want what's mine. He drew up papers to lock the deed in a trust, one that would pass to Emily when I was gone. It wasn't revenge, it was love, for her, for George, for the life we'd built. I signed the papers under a buzzing fluorescent light, my heart heavy but sure. The next part was harder. I had to face Michael. I called him, asked him to come alone. He arrived on a Saturday, his truck pulling up the dirt road, dust swirling like my thoughts. He stepped onto the porch, his face tired, his eyes avoiding mine. Mom, he said, you sounded serious on the phone. Everything okay? I led him inside, to the kitchen table where I'd raised him, where we'd shared countless meals and dreams. The deed sat there, folded neatly beside the photograph of George and me. I didn't sit. I stood, my hands clasped, and looked at my boy, the man who'd broken my heart. "Michael," I said, my voice low but firm, "I heard what Lisa said. About giving this house to her parents. About me being a burden. And I know you didn't stop her." His face went pale, his mouth opening, but no words came. I held up a hand. "I'm not done. This house, this land, it's not just wood and dirt. It's your father's sweat, my sacrifices, our love. I raised you here, gave up everything so you could have a good life. And now you'd let them take it." "Mom, he started, but his voice cracked. He looked down, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "Lisa's been struggling. Her parents need a place, and I thought it'd help you, too. A smaller place, less work." "Less work?" I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think a nursing home's easier than my own home? Michael, I'm not useless. And this land stays mine. I've put it in a trust for Emily. You can't touch it." He looked up, shock in his eyes. "A trust? Mom, you didn't." "I did," I said, softer now. "Because I love you, even now. But I love Emily more than my pain. She deserves this home, this history. And I hope you'll see that one day." The room was quiet, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Michael's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, the one who'd run to me with scraped knees. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I wanted to hug him, to make it all better, but some wounds need time. "I know," I said. "But you've got to make this right. Not for me, for Emily." He left that day, quiet and shaken. I didn't see Lisa for weeks, and when I did, her smugness was gone, replaced by a nervous glance. Michael must have told her about the trust. They didn't bring up the house again. Slowly, things shifted. Michael started visiting more, alone at first, then with Emily. Lisa stayed distant, but I didn't care. My son was coming back to me, step by step. Months later, I sat on the porch with Emily, watching her chase fireflies as the sun set over the orchard. The house was still mine, safe in the trust. But more than that, I'd kept my family's heart intact. I'd lost so much, my parents, George, pieces of myself, but I'd gained something, too. Hope. Not the bright, shiny kind, but the quiet, stubborn kind that grows in the cracks of pain. Emily's eyes were wet now, her small hand squeezing mine. "Grandma," she whispered, "you fought for this house. For me." I pulled her close, her warmth like a balm. "I did, my girl. Because love means fighting for what matters, even when it hurts. This house, this land, it's yours one day. But more than that, it's our story. And I want you to carry it with you, always." The sun dipped lower, painting the room in hues of amber and rose. Outside, the orchard whispered in the breeze, and I felt George's presence, steady as ever. I'd survived betrayal, protected my home, and found peace, not in revenge, but in truth. And with Emily beside me, I knew the future held light, no matter how dark the past had been.